pandemic got us into a reflective space and made us look inward to see what we can do for the world at large. As a self-expression coach, I became a catalyst for women and started Vani, a one-on-one coaching program for women on finding their voice, to speak up, to be visible. As a storyteller, I spotted there were many ordinary people amongst us leading extraordinary lives, making a difference to the world, and they needed to be heard. Thus was born You and I with Rashmi Shetty, where amazing personal journeys with their uniqueness and individuality are showcased, a reaffirmation of the fact, open your eyes wider, the world is far more beautiful when we acknowledge the presence of both you and I. Our guest today is Roopa Pai, one of India's best-known writers for children. This Bangalore-based author has written over 25 books, many of which are bestsellers and are enjoyed as much by adults as by children. Her best-known books include the 8-part Taranauts, India's first fantasy adventure series for children in English, Ready? 99 Must-Have Skills for the World, Conquering Teenager and Almost Teenager, the award-winning national bestseller The Gita for Children, listed by Amazon India as one of 100 Indian books to be read in a lifetime, and its prequel, The Vedas and Upanishads for Children. Her TEDx talk, Decoding the Gita, India's Book of Answers, has received over 2 million views to date. Her most recent book for children is Leeches to Slug Glue, 25 Explosive Ideas That Made and Are Making Modern Medicine. She has also co-authored fitness evangelist and supermodel Milind Soman's memoir, Made in India, and is currently working on a book of poetry translation in which she's translating 100 poems of the much-acclaimed Kannada poet Padma Shri K.S. Nisar Ahmed into English. Her most recent book for adults, CubbonPark, The Green Heart of Bengaluru, was released a month ago. When she's not writing, Roopa can be found leading groups of children and young people on history and heritage walks across her beloved Karnataka as part of her job as director of a company she co-founded, Bangalore Walks. Listen in as Roopa Pai shares her philosophy of life and her journey of becoming the popular author she is today. Hi Roopa, such a pleasure catching up after so long. Welcome to You and I with Rashmi Shetty.
Thank you, Rashmi. Such a great pleasure to be back, because I remember we had first met when you interviewed me on AIR, and it was such a good interview. I was still starting out then, and I had met a lot of journalists and everyone. But that interview with you was so lovely. I've always had a lot of admiration for you. So I'm very glad to be back here.
Likewise, it's mutual. And so Roopa, now we'll go back to little Roopa, because today Roopa is all over the place. She's doing so many talks. She's a writer of repute and writer in diverse subjects, from little children to Milind Soman. There are so many things you've covered. So I want to know what little Roopa was like to the Roopa Pai that the world knows you today.
Oh, okay. Little Roopa and older Roopa are not very different, in the sense that little Roopa's world was books. Always. At that time, I'm more as a reader, now more as a writer. I am afraid I find not so much time to read anymore, except the research material for the book I'm going to write next. That I go deeply into and I read a lot about that. But I don't find that much time for like the casual, eclectic, Catholic reading that I used to do as a child. And you know, as a child, you never realize how much time you have to do these things, to indulge yourself. It's only when you're an adult. So what little Roopa used to do was bunk all PT periods if she could. Okay, always make some excuse of stomach ache, something, so that she could pull out the book that she was always carrying in her bag and sit in the playground or sit in the classroom and read. I read extensively. That time, unfortunately or fortunately, we had very little choice of reading material. Today's children can read from anywhere, anytime. In a minute, you can put it, you can download it on Kindle, any book in the world and read it. But we had to wait for the circulating library to open to be able to go and borrow the books. And those libraries used to open only from some 5 to 8 in the evening. Oh, spend like I don't know, maybe half an hour there. You have a subscription that says 3 books per day or something. Get those books, come home, finish them by that evening before it becomes dark, and then have to wait the whole day again till 5 p.m. to go and get new books. So then what you ended up doing was reread those books. Once I ran out of the books, luckily I went to a convent school, a missionary school called Stella Maris in Bangalore, which always gave books as prizes. So there were those books. Then my mom used to take us to this store called Mecca Stores in Commercial Street, where you could give your old books and get new ones. You can swap. I don't think Blossom and all wasn't there yet. So Mecca Stores was the place. He used to sell a lot of plastic products, and at the back he had these books out. And we were members of whatever libraries, the City Central Library, all that. Read. And when you ran out of things to read, you read the newspaper. Of course, my dad used to make us read the newspaper. And then I went to SSLC school, so borrow ICSE books, CBSE books, English textbooks, read the stories there. Reader's Digest condensed books, magazines for children. And when all else failed, dictionary. I used to, actually, my cousins, the biggest joke in my house, my cousins is like this mad woman used to sit in a corner of every family celebration reading the dictionary, because most of my cousins and things may not have had that many books, but every house had a dictionary. So that was me. Just read.
So you were like a brilliant student as well, because then studies would have been very easy for you, right?
Yes, I must confess, it's almost like an admission. Yes, I was good until 10th grade. It was all swimmingly good. Then after that, of course, when you went out into the big wide world and went to college, and you found that, oh my God, everybody else is also that intelligent or much, much more intelligent than you. So then it was a bit of a struggle. But yeah, I must say academics has not been too difficult for me ever.
You don't have to be so hesitant about it, Roopa. But like the rest of the toppers in the world at that point of time, you too followed everybody else and went into a professional career.
Yes. I mean, that was like against my will, actually. But my mom was very clear that her daughters had to have a professional degree so that they could always look after themselves financially and didn't have to depend on anyone. So she was very, very keen on that. And my dad was an engineer, so I ended up going to my dad's college only, his alma mater, UVC. So I studied there as well. So we were a middle-class family dream, the 3 of us. My sister is a doctor, I'm an engineer, my brother's a lawyer.
So that's perfect.
We can bail each other out of whatever difficulties. Engineers can't bail each other out of anything, because I can't, repair a engine or a machine of any kind. But doctor is good, lawyer is good.
So then what happened? How did you get through engineering college? Was that also a breeze for you?
No, it was hard. And only hard because I just did not want to be there. And I was just rebelling. And first year I did very well because I wanted to get into computer science and I was in electronics. And anybody who did well in the first year would have a choice of change of course. So I did that. After that, I completely, I was like, what am I doing in this place? I don't belong here kind of thing. So as a defiant rebellion, I stopped being interested in the subject. So yeah, it was hard. But in the final year, once again, my mom had this threat over my head that if you don't, get a distinction in your final year, all these horrible things are going to happen to you. Would a young woman of 22 today be scared of such threat by her parents? I don't know. I was petrified. So once again, I applied myself, finished with distinction. And then I told my mom, here's your degree. You can keep it in the puja room. You can do arti to it. Now I'm gone by, I'm going to pursue what I want to do. And then I went back to writing. I must say went back to writing because went back is wrong because I've always been writing.
But writing where?
Earlier, wherever we went, trips, that, I would come and write a journal on it. It was just my way of expression. Always wrote a little essay on everything. And then by the time I was in 10th grade and stuff, I started writing for Deccan Herald. First PUC, second PUC, my articles began to come out in the Deccan Herald. those middles. So that was going on. And through engineering, I wrote for whatever, any magazine, college magazines, which engineering college has a college magazine, but ours did, because one of my seniors was this guy called Shankar Vedantam, who's a very, very well-known journalist now. He also finished his engineering and he went off to the US, joined the Washington Post and the Philadelphia Inquirer. Now he had his own show on NPR for many years. Now he's an independent producer of that show called The Hidden Brain. So I had one or two people. So he started a magazine in the engineering college so as to contribute to that. So wherever there were opportunities, I would write and write and write. So once I finished my degree, I said, now I'm going to go into it full time. So that's what I did.
And how did the journey begin?
As a child of every other child of my generation, like I said, we had very limited access to the kinds of books we had. And Enid Blyton was a hot favorite because she had written 700 books. And every library would have at least 100 of them, maybe, like at least. So she was my primary source of moral science also. All her stories about being greedy is bad, being selfish, you come to a bad end, all those things without being preachy, she would tell in her stories. So she was my educator for that. She was my educator for how to tell a good story, how to keep you flipping the pages, how to write about adventure. And she wrote on a variety of genres as well. So Enid Blyton was my primary guru, and the other one was Amar Chitra Katha. At that time, they were still coming out. Anand Pai was still around, so every 15 days a new title would come out, and we'd wait for it. And then, like every other, at least South Indian middle class family, we had bound copies of various Chitra Kathas. That was my educator for mythology, Indian history. By reading so much Enid Blyton, and the other source of books about the world was Russian books. So I knew a lot about communist Russia. A very rosy picture painted, which it might have been also for people there. They all, obviously it was a very idealistic kind of thing. So they had beautiful picture books and very cheap. The Nava Karnataka publication, that office was near my mom's house. So we used to go and pick up, lots of books. So again, very, very stereotypical of my generation. We all did the same things. We read this. Any reading child of that generation would have read this. And Chandamama and Children's World. Okay, so Children's World, I didn't used to subscribe or something. It used to, once in a while, I used to find it in libraries. The problem with reading so much Enid Blyton was that you grow up, at least I grew up thinking that only Western children or British children had great childhoods, and my childhood sucked because it didn't look anything like those childhoods. Those children were always cycling in the sunshine and being by themselves, no adults around, having adventures, catching smugglers, cooking their own food, going to farms, asking people for eggs and milk and sitting by the road. And I'm like, my God, what a life. Because that was her power as a writer, that she used to write so enticingly about these things that everyone wanted to do it immediately. And for me, my life was very, sequestered in a way, very, very boxed. Yeah, that's all you could do. There was always an adult around. Don't even dream of doing it without adults, or at least without adults in an age of no mobile phones. Yeah. My mom had tabs on me all the time, like where I was, what very little time that I could escape from her, So absolutely. And picnics meant chitrana mosrana, lemon rice and curd rice. That's all. None of that exciting food they were having. Family, always, not just two adults, so many cousins, so much family. No, cycle. I did cycle to school and stuff, but that was later. So I grew up thinking that my life somehow wasn't up to the mark. Because unfortunately, at that time, there weren't many Indian authors writing in English about my life. There was no, as they call today, representation of my life in books that I read. Amar Chitra Katha was fantastic, beautiful, but it didn't talk about me. And the only child protagonists would be Bhakta Prahalada, Dhruva, one or two, Nachiketa, maybe, that's all. There was no other children at all in those stories. So it took me until the age of 13 or something, I grew up like this. And then at the age of 13, I came across this fabulous magazine called Target, which was brought out by India Today. And suddenly somewhere in some library, I must have picked it up. And all those stories were by contemporary Indian authors in English writing about my life. And they made my life sound like the best life. I was like, oh my God, have I been looking at this all wrong? Maybe my life is actually brilliant and I don't even know it because I'm so influenced or impacted by British children's lives. And then your mind started opening up a little. You began to observe things. You began to read other things. Of course, you were already 13. So by the time you're 15, you study world history. And then things began to slot into place. And you say, why were those children in Enid Blyton always by themselves? It's not like their parents didn't love them or something. How come they were let free all the time like that? And then you read about the Second World War, which Enid Blyton lived through, and how London was always in danger of being bombed. So children were sent away to the countryside while fathers went to war, mothers became nurses, rolling bandages, gave to the war effort. And those children were sent off some eccentric relatives who had no time for them. And it must have been very traumatic for those children to be alone in the countryside. They were city children. This was not fun for them. But she had to romanticize it, or maybe the children romanticized it to themselves to make good of a very traumatic time. Imagine they didn't know when they came back whether there would be houses standing, parents alive, schools, whether they could go back. So this COVID pandemic was a bit like that, except that everybody was safely at home with their loving parents, but there was always this threat that something would happen. And then the whole thing about boarding schools, Enid Blyton wrote so seductively about boarding schools that I wanted to go to boarding school. Nobody in my extended family ever went to any boarding school. And I was like, oh God. But again, boarding schools is being sent away from home so that children could be safe while the parents did something else. And once that sort of clicked into place, I realized, my God, the power of a storyteller, how you can change perceptions of a child's own internal world simply by telling a good story and portraying something in a positive light. You can change a whole generation of people, how they think about themselves, their country, their homes. So Target was like a real boom in my head, and then I said, this is what I want to do. I always knew I want to be a writer, but I said, this is what I want to do. I want to write Indian stories for Indian children. And I don't want another generation growing up feeling somewhere, life is somewhere else or paradise is somewhere else. It's here and the now. So let's write about us. That was the journey. So when I finished engineering, Rashmi, I took such a leap of faith. I moved cities. I went from Bangalore to Delhi only based on the address in the Target magazine. I knew they were based there. So I moved there hoping that I would get a job there with knowing nothing about them. There was no internet, no way to find out anything. I mean, I suppose I could have written a letter, but I didn't even do that. I'm like, let's go. And I was married by then. I just finished engineering, got married. Told my husband, you better take a job only in Delhi because I only want to move there.
And he did.
He did, because we had known each other from the time I was 14 and he was 15. So basically, I could manipulate him pretty much. So we went there, walked into the Target office, and I was in such shock because it was such a tiny office. I had imagined this whole group because I had only seen the Deccan Herald office in Bangalore, any publishing thing. And so I imagined it would be this vast cavernous space with people sitting in. Nothing. It was a tiny office. There were only 9 people in the staff, of which there were only 3 were writers, and they were bringing out this fabulous magazine. But I said, and they're like, yeah, what do you want? I'm like, I want to work here. And I could see no empty seats at all. There's no way they could absorb me. But just the previous week, they never, as long as I was in Target, we never lost anybody, in the sense nobody ever quit. But the previous week that I had, the week previous to the day I walked in, one of the editorial staff had quit because she was married to an army officer and she decided that she would move with him to his next posting. And so there was a place, so they could test. They were taking, they were interviewing many people, but the space was there. So I came back, I went back home, wrote a couple of pieces for them, and I got the job. So it is like, for me, from then, I think somewhere subconsciously, I began to feel that there is nothing truer than that. If you truly, truly want something and you're willing to do the effort, take the risks, do the sacrifices, the universe is listening. It will happen, what you're looking for. It was
so true. That's so true. And somewhere I'd read that when things fall in place and it's kind of serendipitous at that point of time, then you're on your true path. So definitely you were on your true path at that point.
Oh my God. And I should, once we go on in the interview, I'll tell you more things about how that Target stint has changed my life. Just that working for Target.
Okay. Yeah, go on. Just tell us that journey.
So, one part is pretty obvious, that obviously I learned about children's writing. I honed my skills for children's writing because it is children's magazine. So yes, and it gave me my first exposure as a children's writer to people. That is fairly obvious. But the editor, she wasn't even the main editor, but the assistant editor at the time that I joined, Vatsala Kaul Banerjee, she continues to be my editor today. So I only worked in Target, unfortunately, but it was enough, I'm sure. I mean, the purpose that the universe put me in Target had been achieved. I had met Vatsala. And of course, a bunch of other nice friends as well. But her, so I just took to her instantly. She was so good at teaching me this stuff. Like, when I write something, she says, "Oh, that's your bias. You think that is a positive quality." I said, "But it isn't." She's like, "No, you have to not, as a children's writer, don't put your biases into the text. Always just write and let the children choose. Maybe you can show consequences that happen, but you can't say that was a good thing, because your influence, you don't know the amount of influence you have as a writer." So things like that. Anyway, so I worked there for 2.5 years only. Then my husband moved to London, so I went off with him and went freelance from then. From then after that, I've never worked for any publication. So and then Vatsala and I fell out of touch for many years because there was no internet, no social media, very difficult to keep in touch at that time. Email had just begun, but almost 10 years after I quit Target, I came back to India after having lived in London and the US and had children and all that. But of course, I continued to write for whatever children's magazines there were. And I was doing a lot of journalism from London. I was their man in London. I said, "You don't have to pay me a salary, but any article you want me to do, just pay for that. I'll go and do the research." I was free. I had no kids. So that was a great experience. Then I came back and I used to write for other children's magazines. And 10 years later or something, Vatsala messages me from somewhere and says, "Hey, how are you?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm good. How are you?" And she says, "I've just taken over as editorial director of children's books at Hachette, India. It's a new company, etc. And I was reading one of your stories in a children's magazine, and I just loved the tone of it. And I want you to write for me." And that's how I started writing books for children. Otherwise, I was only doing some magazines, bringing up my children, writing. And then Bangalore Walks had begun by then. So I was doing all that. And Vatsala came out of nowhere and said, "Write." And I began to write. And everything I've written, including the Gita for children, which is my absolute bestseller. Unless she had pointed me towards the direction of the Gita, I would not have gone there. So that's a different story. But the thing is, I met her there and she's been my Krishna. She's guided my chariot into all kinds of battlefields and said, and every time I'm like, "No, I don't want to do this." She's like, "No, you have to do it. I'm sorry, you stay here and fulfill your writerly dharma. Write what I tell you to write." Somehow she seems to know me better than I know myself. She has faith in me. She trusts me. She knows what I can do, my capabilities. And now it's blind trust. Okay, you tell me to do, I'll do, Vatsala, whatever you say. So, so that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's so true. And now that you spoke about the Gita, before we get there, that entire series, the Taranath series, with which you became popular amongst children, the cool Indian author, how did you get that idea, which was literally out of this world, Roopa?
Right, I know. So once again, I must say that my first inspiration was Enid Blyton again. She used to write about this. She wrote that Faraway Tree, remember?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was a fantasy.
Yeah.
Where not children, maybe there were children in it, I can't remember, but they used to climb up the tree and a new world would come to the top of the tree every week or every fortnight, and they would. So I had something like that where children from Earth travel to new worlds and have some adventures there, learn something, and they bring back that knowledge and use it to solve a real world problem in India. Some very ambitious canvas. Okay, I don't know how many volumes one story would have taken, but that was my thing. See, because I told you, right, I wanted to write Indian stories for it. So my characters in my mind had to be Indian. There is no way they could be anything else. The other inspiration was the Belur and Halebeedu temples in Karnataka, the 1,000-year-old temples. I always loved those temples. There's something very magical about them. And once when I came back from the US and all, you come back with a new appreciation for your country and for your city and everything. So you go look at the familiar things with new eyes. And then this guide told us about this compass, which is on the ceiling of these temples. And the compass obviously has no markings for north, east, west. It has guardians of those directions. So based on what that person is riding, what he's holding, which god it is. And then, which direction is south, north, east, west, and the eight cardinal directions, north, east, south, west. So I said, oh, it's going to be an Indian story. Then maybe we can have like guardians of 8 worlds. Because when you say Ashtadikpalakas, it becomes all the children are like, okay, whatever, I'm not listening. It's going to be one of those, some Sanskrit words which I don't understand. But when you say guardians of the 8 directions, it suddenly sounds like, this I can relate to. So I said, okay, maybe 8 worlds, something, maybe they visit 8 worlds, these children from India, etc. Some kind of story was forming. And then Vatsala asked me a very pertinent question. She said, okay, these are Indian children. What will they call their mother? Their mothers. I said, I don't know. I mean, I have not thought about what they'll call their mothers. So she said, will it be Ma, Amma, Ammi, Mummy, Mommy, Mother? I said, I said, but why does that matter? She said, no, immediately it places them in a certain geography in India. And then they become like, oh, it's a South Indian story, and then other children may not want to read it because it becomes too set here. And unless you say mommy, and I'm like, no, I don't want them to be calling their mothers mommy because that's not what I want. So then I said, wow, that's very true. So she said, why don't you just move it all into a parallel universe? That can, think about it, make it a fantasy, an out and out fantasy. And I said, okay, I can try that. But, as I said, I wanted to be Indian in some way. And that's how it all developed. It's a parallel universe, but it's a very India-inspired universe. There is mythology in it. There is Indian history in it. There is social structure in it. If you go through the books, like caste system, everything is there. Ambassador cars are there. Like, just the India of my childhood and our past is recreated there. And the philosophy is also very Indian in the sense, in the whole Taranaut series, which apparently, once I finished it, I was told that it was the first Indian fantasy adventure series for children in English, the first ever. So the philosophy is also very Indian. And I didn't even realize it, Rashmi, at that, because I don't know what was Indian philosophy, but it was something inherent in me to not make, so it's not Albus Dumbledore versus Voldemort. There is no good versus evil kind of binary at all in the books. It's very much, these both are twins. I think Rowling also explores that, but somehow in the Western mind, it's always good versus evil. And in the Indian mind, it is Deva versus Asura, Asura, but they can keep changing their places. Devas become too arrogant, they get punished, they get cursed. And the Asuras do penance, they can get whatever boon they want in the world. So, and they can keep moving between these two binaries. So there is nothing fixed. And I think it's a great way to tell stories, and a great philosophy of life, because that means everybody gets a chance at redemption. Second chances, third chances, fourth chances. That's also the lesson in the reincarnation story. You can come back, you can try again, No eternal damnation in the hellfires of Satan. There's nothing like that. You can keep and be careful, because don't start resting on your laurels and get complacent that now I'm in heaven. No, it's only a Disneyland kind of heaven, until your good karma runs out, then you have to come back. So there are very flawed heroes and villains in the stories that in Taranaut stories. So it shows that they have weak sides there. But what makes a hero is that he chooses to do the right thing each time. And I wanted to tell kids that the choice is really in us, in our hands, whether to be a hero or a villain. It's not circumstances. You can always choose to be one. It's hard, but you can choose. So Taranauts that was the inspiration. And then I made it very Indian. So the whole parallel universe that I constructed for the series is called Mithya. And the whole of Mithya lies in an ocean, an endless shimmering ocean called Darya. And then the sun, the super sun of Mithya that shines down, is called Tara. So all kinds of, so it became a very fun Easter egg spotting thing for adults who read the books. They're like, I got that reference. The Abhinav Bindra is in it because he just won the gold medal that time. So he's in it. There's a sharpshooter there who has a name that is made up of Abhinav Bindra's name, scrambled. So all those things, he's called Dead-Eye Darbin, the character. Darbin is Bindra, actually. So I had so much fun. And the books are full of riddles and puzzles. So I had to construct each riddle and puzzle by myself. So the children who are reading it can solve the riddles, or they can wait for the Taranauts to solve them. So I don't know, I just felt that, and I continue to feel very strongly that Indian kids particularly, they like to be challenged with big words. With the more they're hungry for information, they're great sponges. So yeah, that was how Taranauts came about.
Completely agree with you, because this was a lot into what my next question, it's actually leading there, because even the Mahabharata was told by Vyasa and written by Ganesha. And what is the condition? He should not stop. So what did Vyasa do? Put riddles and puzzles so that Ganesha takes time to think.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah, so that's where we bring in the Gita for children. And after that fantasy, you come into something so ancient, which, yes, only adults were reading. Children were learning it by heart, chanting it, never got into the meaning, because I'm also one of those kids who got into it for chanting, but never went into learning the meaning so young. So when that idea was suggested to you, like you said, Vatsala suggested, what were some of your first reactions, Rupa?
No. Are you kidding? These were my first. I don't know anything about the Gita. How can I write it? Why would you think that I would write about some ancient boring book? Like, I am the cool author. I write Taranauts. Like, why would I be that? Those were my first reactions. Because it was true. I had never, I did not grow up in a home which had even a copy of the Gita.
But Amar Chitra Katha has
yes, that was the one
Mahabharata.
Amar Chitra Katha that I did not read or enjoy very much, because it had giant speech bubbles with talking and talking. And, it was, I'm sure Anand Pai or whoever wrote that did a marvelous job of trying to make it somewhat simpler. But those concepts, I want to read about like exciting stuff, I wanted to read about tales of Shiva or tales of Vishnu or something, where always some exciting stuff was happening. This was, the panels never changed. It was always the battlefield, always. And he's going on talking, and Arjuna is just sitting like this. So I read it once because I'm an inveterate reader, but it was not one of my favorites. But that's all. And no, not only that, even in school, even though I went to a missionary school, we had a teacher called Mrs. Anandalakshmi, who was a Gita teacher, chanting teacher and all. Then the thing was, like you said, if you're academically bright, you get caught for all these things. So come, you learn Gita chanting. There's a competition in TTD, Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam. So they're asking for people, I'm going to send you. So that way I had some interaction with the Gita. But again, as you said, chanting, learning by heart, going and saying that. And in my mind, oh God, another Sunday wasted going to that competition when I could just be chilling at home. So that was the extent of engagement. I knew that it happened in the Mahabharata and just some general, but nothing much. And really in my life, I never thought I would be writing about the Gita for children or anyone else. And Vatsala, like, finished the Taranaut series. I was feeling very fictioned out. I said, I can't write any more fiction because it took me 4 years to write those 8 books. So I was done. And then I said, okay, let me try a change of track, change of pace, and went back to my science background. Suddenly it became useful, the engineering. So I said, let me write a popular science book for children. So I wrote a book called What If the Earth Stopped Spinning and 24 Other Mysteries of Science. And that was fun because for the first time, I understood concepts that I should have probably understood in 8th grade, 9th grade. I am very good at taking exams and finishing, but some of the concepts, physics, chemistry, hadn't really gone in until I began to research it as like, this is an interesting topic. How will I tell this to kids by making them understand? Then suddenly all that began to fall into place. So that was fun. Finished that. Then again, I was out of ideas. And then Vatsala said, hey, I have a great idea for you, something interesting. So I said, okay, what? And then she said, you should write the Bhagavad Gita for kids. I'm like, actually, my eyes popped out. What? Why? But isn't it for old people? Like, it's what? It's not for children. And why would I impose? Because I was imagining like this, I really imagined that it would be a somehow casteist text or somehow sexist or patriarchal in some way. I'm like, no, I don't want to go there. I'm not whitewashing anything in the Gita for children. I'm only going to, all this resistance happened. But when I examined it a little later, when I began to examine it, I realized that it stemmed from fear, that I don't know it at all. And what gives me the right to interpret it? I know people who've gone for years and years to Gita classes and they say, we've just begun to unpeel one layer. And I'm like, no, I can't do it. It's not like casual read and write about it. So I said, no. And I don't know, I never studied Sanskrit in my life in school. No. I said, I'm not going to do it. Certainly not. But the excuses I gave was, it's not meant for children. I'm sure it's very patriarchal. I'm sure all this nonsense. And for some reason, and I said, why do you want to write it at all? She said, there isn't a secular Bhagavad Gita for children in the market. All the ones there are put out by religious organizations. So I thought it's a good idea. Why not? Like, we should do a secular Bhagavad Gita. This is an ancient Indian text. She's a history student, master's in history. So she said, it's an ancient Indian text. Don't you want to research it? And I feel you're so interested in mythology. I said, mythology. She's saying, but this comes in the Mahabharata. I'm like, that's fine, but all that. So we went back and forth like this for 6 months. For some reason, she did not give up on me. And she just was convinced I had to do it. She said, okay, do me a favor. Fine, you have all these resistance and like arguments. Just go and sit with a copy of the Gita. Actually read it. Give it a try. As a good researcher, isn't this what one must do? How can you reject something because you don't know it? You have to read it. So I said, okay, fine. I said, okay, because I respect her so much that I said, okay, fine. Went to an aunt of mine who had taught Chinmaya Balvihar as, I think I always thought she was a very cool person who was a physics master's, but also so I was like, okay. And she'd always taught children in school. So I went to her and she said, yeah, sure. And all. Then like a teacher, she took out a chart paper. She made a mind map, chapter 1, chapter 2. This is what happens. And we were just, in 1 hour, how much can you talk? So she just started me off and then she gave me a bunch of commentaries. And one thing she said stuck with me. She said, and yeah, Krishna and Arjuna, of course, were best friends. And so then I said, one sec, they were best friends. So she said, yeah. And I thought of myself as somebody who knew the Mahabharata story very well. And I said, I never knew that. I always thought he was like, the only picture in my mind of Gita-padesha is Krishna standing like this, Abhaya Hasta, and this one, So I said, oh, I thought some mentor-mentee kind of relationship or guru-shishya. And she said, no, they were best friends. So instantly, in my mind, I'm like, so the Gita is a conversation between two best friends. And she said, yes. I said, oh, I think I can tell that story to children. That maybe there is a way. So she told me a few things. And then we only got to sort of the first chapter and a little beyond, and I had to go. So I said, okay. She said, take this 15 days later or something, we'll meet again. But these are my favorite commentaries. You can make a start. And for me, inveterate reader, as soon as I had the books, I had to start reading them. I never went back to Tarakini, her name is my husband's aunt, never went back to her because I was so engrossed, engaged, riveted by the Gita. I was like, my goodness, why has nobody made me read this book before? And how wonderful is its philosophy for just living life. And children, imagine if they were equipped with this kind of worldview when they were children, life would become so much easier, particularly against the kind of backdrop we live in today. It's so competitive and so like hustle, this capitalistic culture, and always looking outwards to gain stuff, to buy material things, and never looking in a very rich outer life, very poor inner life. And if that could be reversed, how much if as we build our external resources, why don't we build our internal resources? And I felt that the Gita was the best way to build your internal resources because it was compact, it was very succinct, it was a conversation between friends. And it was a situation that, it's not generally sitting in the forest and talking. There was a war to be fought, very fraught. I said, so when Vatsala called me back a month later saying, okay, you've had your month. Now, if you tell me it's a terrible book or it's not meant for children or there's some things about it that you're not comfortable with, I'll let you go. What do you think? Then she's like, and I was like, but my God. So she's like, okay, fine, bye, do it. She put the phone down. She didn't know very much about it either. She was just, so that's how the Gita came out. And it was such a joy to write. I felt so validated by what Krishna said in the Gita, because some of those things I had felt always, but nobody would validate me. Then people would say competition is the thing. And the thing is, I had always topped things and, I had always done well. So I had begun to think, okay, that's the way, you have to compete, but always with great reluctance, somehow like this unsettled stomach whenever I was going for a competition. But that I was told was just, nerves. But I began to realize, no, I don't like it. I don't like this idea of one being bigger than the other, being judged constantly. So those kinds of things. And yeah, it was so transformative for me, Rashmi, just to research the Gita. Writing that book just changed my outlook.
Yeah, Rupa, here I want to ask you a very basic question, maybe for you, but I'm very curious. The Gita, the philosophies of life, which we see actually open layers and metaphors as we grow older.
Yeah.
Now, you are not as young as those little kids who are going to read it. How do you dissect what you have learned and go into that element to connect to those kids to make them want to listen to you? Obviously, it's storytelling that will help. But how do you kind of dissect those philosophies? Because they are the philosophies of life itself.
Yeah.
So, how did you do that? For me, that was the curious element, because today, when I do classes with kids, I do ask them questions, tell them next class when you come, you're supposed to get the answer. They do it with a lot of curiosity. Many of them go straight to Google right there and they get the answer.
Yeah.
But how did you sit down to actually dissect it? Because we have experienced life, so we can see it reflected. But they haven't. For them to understand it, how did you manage to dissect it for yourself first?
Yeah. I mean, the technique, see, the thing was, I realized quite early on that in the research, that really Kurukshetra everything is a metaphor in the Gita. So it's not, you don't have to be only a warrior for that to make sense to you or be relevant to you. Or if you look at it another way, we are all warriors. We are all every day fighting wars. Sometimes like actual physical wars against the administration or against some, some person who's making our life difficult, but mostly battles within ourselves about what's the right thing to do in this situation. What is the wrong thing to do? Should I do the convenient thing, which will make me cool and make me conform and not make me stand out? Or should I do the difficult thing, which I feel in my heart is right, but which will set me apart as some kind of outlier and lose me this company of my friends and, maybe Instagram likes or whatever, so it will lose me all of that. How much am I willing to go by my own gut? So these are the kind of battles we are fighting every day. Once that idea came into my head, I could think back to the time when I was a child, and it's far more difficult for a child because children really want to conform. They do not want to stick out. And so belonging becomes everything, because we know of, all of us have been in school, all of us, see, the advantage of writing for children is that we have all been children once. So if we just are able to think back to that time, how difficult it is when you are somewhat different from your peers, even maybe physically, mannerisms or anything, how difficult it is to be accepted. If you think differently and don't go along with what the group as a whole decides, even more difficult to keep your friends or to belong. So in that kind of situation, it seemed to me that Arjuna's act of collapsing to the floor of the chariot when he realized, oh my God, this is the enormity of what I'm actually going to attempt, is knowing full well that everybody's eyes were on him, even his own people's eyes, and I can't call them the enemy, but the opposition's eyes were on him. He did not hesitate for a minute to let his true feelings show. He didn't care. He put on the blinkers. He doesn't care what the world thinks, this or that. These guys, they are depending on me. These guys are hoping that I walk away from the battlefield. But neither of them mattered. In that moment, he was willing to stop everything he was doing and go inside and inquire, because really Krishna is only his own higher self, his best friend. So I was able to have that conversation without, so for me, suddenly it stood out as the most fearless act. To everybody else, it seemed like a fearful act. He had collapsed. He was looking pathetic on the floor of the chariot. But to be able to not care about the opinions of people and not proceed in something which has been already decided, you're already on the battlefield, but you say, I will not take a step further until I have resolved the conflict in my head, seemed to me that the thing that every child, every human should be able to do, should have the strength to be able to do that. How do we get the strength, the moral courage to be able to say, I will not do it until I have resolved it in my head, is when we have a friend that we can depend on, who always has our back, who knows what's best for us. And that friend cannot be suddenly WhatsApped. It has to, he or she or it lives inside of you. And if you're able to develop the strongest relationship and the best friendship with that person, with your own higher self, the battlefield becomes easy. Like, the war is going to be hard. There are going to be consequences. All that will not change. But you can go out and do your part with peace in your heart and in your mind, like Arjuna did by the end of the Gita. So once I knew that, I said, this is a lesson that has been. Now, how do we use language and setting and thing to make it palatable to children, to make it interesting for them? So all the commentaries and everything that I had read, I realized went shloka by shloka. And every time, by the time I reached this 10th shloka or something, I have forgotten what, because they don't actually, there's no logical flow many times. It just jumps from one thing to another, because a lot of it is left to the interpretation of the reader. Now, the children cannot be expected to do that interpretation. So we have to curate it a little bit. The writer has to curate it. And luckily for me, like, Vatsala had already taught me so much that no biases, your biases shouldn't come out. You just report what was said. So I did that. I made us the whole story. I did not bring in every shloka. I have brought in the gist. And I didn't want the children to ever forget that they were engaging with a classical text of great value and which has been revered for centuries, millennia in this land. So I didn't want to suddenly Arjuna calling Krishna, dude, bro, what should we do? I didn't want it to become that level also. It should be, it's a classical text. You should be aware of it. So I used a little classical English in those parts. That was my Amatsra Katha. Like, that kind of language came in there. And then, but again, I said, if I continue in this vein, the children might lose interest. So I introduced a little sub-chapter after every chapter, where I used contemporary colloquial language. And that was me. That was not Krishna. That was me talking to the kids directly. Think about it. What can you gain from this? I picked one lesson from each and put it out. So there are so many other lessons, so many other layers, but that will keep. They can come to it slowly as they grow up. But if I can intrigue them, if I can engage them, that it's not say that it has some value, then they will be more open to engaging with it as they grow up. Otherwise, if they never come across it, they would be like me, intimidated by it and say, oh, whatever, man, it's too difficult. I don't want to go there. And then what happens? You get seduced by other philosophies and who are actually saying the same thing in different words. And you have to go to so many to get, because the Gita is very compact, very holistic. It has everything in it. Really, any question that you want is answered there. Of course, I'm a fan, so I talk like that, but I really feel it's true. But of course, the Gita speaks differently to different people and everyone has their own version. But for me, it felt like the book of answers for everything. And I said, somehow I have to come. So in that second sub-chapter, I talk to them and pick up examples from their life and make it relevant to them. So then when they go back and read the chapter again and it's classical, some correlation happens, and it was only so that they would be, that's what, interested in, they would treat it as a text that, and they would say, we did, it came out of India. And so they feel that we have already thought about these things. We have come up with answers. It's not only other philosophies and maybe Western philosophies. I'm sorry to keep saying Western, but that's what we are exposed to a lot. Any English-speaking child in India is exposed to Western philosophies and Western thoughts a lot. So that is, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but you must know that here also people have already thought about it many, many, many years ago, have come up with similar answers. And then with that confidence, when you engage with the West or any other philosophy, you're able to take the best of that as well with respect. You're able to truly respect, oh my God, same thing. Like, ours also say that. But if you don't have those roots, you're going to go and say, oh, our fellows never came. They only came up with some fuddy-duddy stuff. And, these guys are the cool ones. So the same thing that happened to me when I was young, I don't want that to happen again. So that's how I did it, I think. I spoke to the children directly in the intervening chapters.
Oh, okay. And the same thing you followed with Vedas and Upanishads as well?
Vedas and Upanishads was little much more difficult for me, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, very sprawling texts and far less logic.
Yes.
This is at least part of a story. So Vyasa did very well.
Yes.
I feel, if you ask me, he constructed the whole Mahabharata as the mango to hold the seed, the important thing of the Gita. So he created all this wonderful, wonderful cast of characters. That was his way of drawing the reader in and then keeping them. And it's compact, and you have characters that it's a story of bhakti, love, friendship. So it's easy to connect. But Upanishads are, my God, they're really all over the place. But for me, the interest was that if the Gita is a distillation of all the wisdoms of the Upanishads, I wonder what else. So I wanted to go back. And there's an interesting story there also. Once the Gita finished and it did well, began to do well, people embraced it. Then Vatsala's next thing is, now you do Vedas or something. So I was like, no, I will not be typecast. Do other stories. This is not my only thing. Okay, do what you like. She actually had the sense and the grace to let me alone for another year or more, I think. And I went and wrote other books. I wrote one on Krishna Devaraya of Hampi. I wrote a book on life skills for teenagers called Ready, inspired by both Gandhiji's Sabarmati Ashram and by Baden-Powell Scouts and Guides movement. So I wrote that. Then I wrote a book on economics without knowing anything about economics, because what the Gita did for me personally was it showed me that you can approach any subject. You may not know anything about it, but at least don't write it off or don't say it's too difficult or it may not be interesting. That's a boring subject. Don't have these preconceived notions. Go into any field of study or inquiry with an open mind and humility, and it will speak to you if you approach it like that. So I said economics is something that I've always felt like I don't know anything, and I feel so handicapped when people talk about stuff like stock markets and value of the dollar against the rupee. I was like, okay, I need to understand this little because I'm an adult living in this world. I should understand a bit. So best way then I had realized by then is best way to understand a subject is write a book about it for children. So you do the research. So, and that, Rashmi, that became like a sleeper hit, that book. And Raghuram Rajan endorsed it. I'm like, okay, so this is a good thing, must keep doing this, must not say no to things, must not close mind against things.
So you started listening to the Krishna with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Vedas was far more difficult. I was interested, but I read a lot of books. Books somehow didn't cut it for me usually books have always saved me. Like I read books and I understand things. I read a variety of books, but somehow all the books I read about the Upanishads, they seem to, because I think every writer has a problem with doing everything about the Upanishads. So they skim here, there, they put some general. So it was not working for me. Then I said, okay, maybe I should try listening to someone explain it. So I started listening. I said, okay, technology, YouTube would make everything so simple. I don't have to go somewhere and listen to a pravachana. I can just listen on YouTube. And you don't have to listen only to Swamijis or monks or religious people. You can listen to thinkers, scholars, academics. So I started shopping for Guru on the YouTube, and wherever. And my God, such amazing lectures. And only when somebody spoke and explained it, my mind began to open to the Upanishads. I was like, okay. Because it's not so like you write it, because it was never written, right? They were all just explained and interpreted. My primary source and of great wisdom and humor and lightness and grace for discourses was Swami Sarvapriyananda of the Ramakrishna Mutt, the Vedanta Society. So he's the resident monk of the Vedanta Society in New York. So I listened like one crazy person to everything he had ever put out. I continue to, in fact. And he was amazing, and also various other books and stuff. Then the books began making sense with this interpretation. There, so yeah, it took a while. It's a little different. It doesn't have that immediate appeal. You have to sort of want to be in it to read the Vedas and Upanishads for children. But yeah, it has also done very well. But the Gita is somewhere up there. It's a song. It's a divine song. It sings to you. So there is a certain appeal in the Gita. This needs little more engagement. You have to sit with it, think about it. Yeah.
And then you go and you write a book with Milind Soman.
Yeah, that's what I said. No, don't have biases. Anything.
How did that feel? Yes.
Yeah,
I should ask you that.
that was also strange because that was 2016, the Rio Olympics were going on. And I read this beautiful story in the lead up to the Rio thing or something about this young man called Dattu Bhokanal. He had qualified for the rowing thing in the Olympics. Okay. And there was some story in the newspaper somewhere that his mother he was from such a poor family, and his mother had fallen off her bed or something and was ICU, and this boy was there participating, and she does not even know that her son is participating at some small thing like this. And I was so deeply moved by that story that I did some more research on this Dattu, realized that he came from a community of well diggers, very poor in Latur in Maharashtra, and very, very like grinding poverty, well diggers. And imagine his father died when he was died suddenly. And he was the oldest son or something, and he was petrified of water. So he could not be a well digger. And then he said, okay, army was the next best thing, as it is for the very poor in India, that offers a great life. And so he went and joined the armed forces. And there, because of his physique or whatever, they were made to do many things, he was put in the rowing thing, and he's scared of water. But he also realized that if I do well in these sports, I may get promotions. I get awards, rewards, whatever. So he's, fighting against his fear of water. He began to row. And within 2 or 3 years, he reached level where he went to the Olympics. He beat the he made the Olympic qualifying time. And so what a fascinating. And then he finally goes there, and his mother is so ill and cannot. So I just wrote about it in Facebook. One post. My God, I don't know what, I think some celebrity had said, I don't know why we send our athletes to the Olympics. They've never been anything, because the first 2 or 3 days had finished and we had fallen out of everything by that time. Of whatever events had happened then, we hadn't qualified. So I said, I simply wrote this. I had not even known that the celebrity, I just wrote it because I was moved by this. And I wrote the last line. I said, it takes all kinds of courage to be an Olympian. And it went viral. It got shared so many times. So then suddenly I felt this huge responsibility descend on me that I have to write about somebody every day. So that, there are these wonderful stories. And I've always been a sports fan. I don't play anything. Like I said, PT period, I was sitting with books. But I swim, and that's all. But I'm very much in awe of sports people. So I began to write about, then suddenly it seemed to me I should write about female athletes, very organically developed. Every day of the Rio Olympics, I wrote a story about an Indian athlete who was participating and said, watch her today, like, giving the time. It became like a very popular series. And maybe 5th or 6th or 7th or 8th piece that I wrote, people used to like. I got some thousands of friend requests, which I just ignored completely. But because I didn't know who they were and whatever, it was all flattering, but, I didn't want to make them my Facebook friends. And then one day in the comment section of one of these stories, there is a Milind Soman, who says, how well you write, Rupa. And I was like, what? Milind Soman. So I said, can't be too many people with that name, but let me check it out. It was the Milind Soman. And I'm like, oh, wow. And he sends me a friend request. I'm like, yes, please accept to him, saying thank you and all. Very, very, it's very casual. Thank you, Milind. Like, that's all. And I thought that was the end of that. That was enough for bragging rights, right? Called all my girlfriends. Guess who sent me a friend request? Guess who sent me a friend? Okay, fine. I thought that was the end of that. 1 year later, Penguin calls me and says, we know you're a children's writer and this is an unusual request, but, would you be... I'm like, well, what? Tell me. So they said that this Milind Soman, we've been chasing him for years to do a memoir. And he's finally accepted to do it. And we've been finding writers for him to look at their styles to pick a co-writer. And he looked at all the styles and everything and said, actually, there is this lady who writes on Facebook and she writes very well about sport. And they said, but we can't get some Facebook person to become a writer. She has to be a writer. So he said, I don't know whether she's a writer or not, but she writes very well about sport and she writes. So I think she's a writer. So why don't you contact her? So then he remembered my name, he told them. And when he told them my name, Penguin said, oh, of course she's a writer. We've heard about her. In fact, we've been trying to get her to write a children's book for us for a long time and she hasn't accepted so far. So she said, are you willing to? It's very odd, like it's a biography kind of memoir. Will you be okay? And I'm like, excuse me, madam, if Milind Soman asks for me by name, I will certainly do it. As it turns out, he turned out to be a wonderful guy with no celebrity drama, nothing. Very sorted in his head. In fact, Rashmi, I was writing the Vedas and Upanishads parallelly with interviewing him.
Oh, wow.
Because he's not easy to get my hands on. It could be once every 2-3 months. Sometime he'll come to Bangalore, I fly to Bombay, he has some time, that kind of thing. So I was doing this on parallelly. So we had long discussions about the Upanishads. I would tell him what I was working on and he would tell me stuff from his life that matched with the philosophy, and the Upanishads philosophy was so similar. And he was very Indian in his thinking, and he's lived in the same house in Bombay his whole life. So, and he's so rooted in his Indian thing. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. And we got on very well. A book came out. I don't know how it's done, but yeah, I was very happy to have met this person. Yeah.
Okay. And the recent one where with CubbonPark.
Yeah.
Are you now talking about climate change and nature and environment like everyone is, or how did that go?
Actually, no, not at all. So that book about CubbonPark is not about trees at all. Yeah, it really isn't. So how that came about was that I've been part of a company that my husband founded called Bangalore Walks for more than 16 years now. So we do history and heritage walks around Bangalore and Karnataka only. And I do the children's walks. I take students around Bangalore telling the history and all. So history of Bangalore is familiar to me, but I've never written a book on it. And one of my other editors, the one who edited my science book from a different company, she has been in several companies and now she's part of Speaking Tiger Books. So she said that since you are already a Bangalore history buff and know a lot about it, we are doing a series. Speaking Tiger was bringing out a series of neighborhood books. So now not city books, but neighborhood books, like go deep dive into a particular neighborhood for flavor. So Delhi, they had brought out Chandni Chowk, Connaught Place. In Bombay, they had Shivaji Park and Kolaba. She said, Bangalore, would you like to attempt some neighborhood for us? And I was like, yeah, sure. Then I began to think, which neighborhood? And I could not think of a single neighborhood in Bangalore that I felt I knew really well because I've moved around in Bangalore. So one neighborhood is part of my childhood, one neighborhood is part of my adulthood, like that. So there was no neighborhood that I think of that I still felt the same way for as I did when I was a child. And then Sudeshna, who is my editor, she said, it doesn't have to be a very conventional neighborhood. And she said, maybe you could write about Lal Bagh or something. And I'm like, no, not Lal Bagh, because Lal Bagh, there are many books. That's when I said, CubbonPark. That's the one place that has held me since I was a child. I went to, we were taken there as children, Putani Express, cotton candy, popcorn, all the rest of it. Then I grew up, I went to UVC, which is next to CubbonPark. I was born in St. Martha's Hospital next to CubbonPark. My dad was a member of the Century Club. We used to go in CubbonPark. Then I got, like I said, met my husband, and I have had so many while we were dating, good times in CubbonPark. Then I got married and moved to the other side of town. And now CubbonPark is absolutely midway between my parents' house and my in-laws' house. And now then I took my children there, and now the children are grown up and gone. Now I go there twice a week with my dog because it's the only place that allows dogs. This place has not changed for me. It is the heart of, for me, CubbonPark is not so much about its trees as it is about its people. It's a people's park. And once I started thinking about that, I said, it means something very, very deep to the people of Bangalore who've grown up in Bangalore and who even have immigrated to Bangalore. So I said, that is how the story about CubbonPark came out, the book. It's only 2 months old now. In 2004, I did a book on Bangalore called Ticket Bengaluru, which was more of a compilation of restaurants, this, that, and a little bit of essays about neighborhoods and all. But this is my first real book on Bangalore, another one for adults now, which is just, yeah, I'm so happy.
I can see that joy.
Yeah.
And after this extremely interesting journey all over the place, one pause moment for you. All of us went through this forced pause in the last 2.5 years, the pandemic. Each of us took our lessons. Well, the perils of losing them back again to the grind, I'm not too sure. But what were your takeaways, Rupa? Because you're such a philosophical person, grounded person, humble. But what did the pandemic teach you?
I think it just showed me that in the worst times, how people come together for each other. It was a real life demonstration of that, particularly in India, how people just came out for each other, and then building of community again, that was wonderful. The part about which everybody else seems to have been most affected by, which is having to stay at home and enjoy, like, with the family, spend more time with family, etc. For me, that didn't make so much of a thing because I work from home only. This home is my theater of operation. So for me, I was very comfortable being at home. So I think I felt like the balance of the world needed to be restored in some way. And this was not a wonderful way, but there are in every situation, there are things that are wonderful about it and things that are terrible about it. And this was such a demonstration to me of both contained in one. It almost seemed to me like what Krishna was saying in his Vishwarupa form, I am come as time, destroyer of worlds. So the coronavirus seemed to be something like that. While I destroy, I also bring you all closer together to realize what are the important things, what is truly. So in fact, I used to joke with friends that this seems like this is Kalki Avatar to me. Maybe the COVID virus is actually Kalki Avatar. It came on a bat instead of on a horse, but teach us to reconnect with ourselves, give us time to spend, to strengthen our inner resources. We have no other, you are forced to strengthen your inner resources because everywhere outside is now enemy, and the invisible enemy. You can't hide from it. So unless how much fear, people lived in fear, right? And Sanatana Dharma is all about how to live fearlessly. I think it gave all of us some kind of impetus to think about what is fearlessness and how to build our inner stuff.
Wow. Wow. And 3 life lessons, Rupa, that you would like to leave us with.
I think, the pursuit of happiness is overrated. Pursue fearlessness for sure. And only by fearlessness will you be free. And freedom is the true pursuit, is the true goal. If you are fearless, you can achieve anything in your life and you can have a happiness. All that become byproducts if you are fearless. That's one. Another thing is there are no heroes and villains outside of us, no gods and demons outside of us. We contain all of them within us. Every time we choose, who you are is who you choose to be. Your destiny is entirely in your hands. You come in, of course, with a certain scaffolding, like of your social status or your abilities or whatever, but that is the scaffolding. But you can get to the top of that scaffolding. That part is really your choice to make. So, and the other thing is that please think of yourself as limitless, as the universe, as the cosmos. You are not small. You are not powerless. You have all the resources. You have to believe that you have all the resources within you to change everything. But instead of looking outside to change the world, change yourself and you will see how the world changes along with it. It's only the universe is contained in our heads. So just be expansive. Don't limit yourself. Think of yourself as infinite. Embrace the world to your bosom. Think of everything in the world as part of you and you will be free.
Oh, wow. So you put the entire quote of Mahatma Gandhi, be the change that you want to see around you, so powerfully.
Yeah.
But Rupa, like always, a pleasure speaking to you. Honored to have you on You and I with Rashmi Shetty. Stay blessed, my friend, and continue inspiring and writing these beautiful works on what exactly life is. Because over these last 10 years since we have met, nothing has shifted other than the number of books that have been published in your name. So continue shining and God bless you, Rupa.
Thank you, Rashmi. Namaste. Thank you very much.
With that, we come to the end of this weekly quest of You and I with Rashmi Shetty. Do let us know if you know people who make the world beautiful. Write in to rashmi.thethirdeye@gmail.com. That is rashmi.thhirdeye@gmail.com. Come, let's explore this amazing world together, both you and I.